In this part of our video, we're going to talk about zero exponents and negative exponents. So our core concept here says that for any non-zero number a, if a is taken to the power of 0, it is 1. Now the power of 0 to the 0 is undefined, so that's why a needs to be some number that's not 0. So for example, 4 to the 0 is equal to 1. A to the 0 is equal to 1, as long as a doesn't actually equal 0. Now negative exponents are interesting. Negative exponents do not make numbers negative. So for any integer n and any non-zero number a, if we have a to the negative n, it's the reciprocal of a to the n. So that sounds kind of wordy, but the number example makes it a lot clearer. When we look at this right here, 4 to the negative 2 is equal to the reciprocal, and so we get 1 over 4 squared. If we had 3 to the negative 5, that would be 1 over 3 to the 5th. 2 to the negative 10th would be 1 over 2 to the 10th. Now sometimes it's given to you where that number with the negative exponent is on the denominator to begin with. If we have 1 over 2 to the negative 3, the reciprocal of that would mean it would equal 2 to the 3rd. 1 over 3 to the negative 4th, the reciprocal of that would be 3 to the 4th. This works for any value of a as long as a is not equal to 0. So let's look at some practice with this. In part A, we have 6.7 to the 0 power. We said anything to the 0 power is 1, as long as that number wasn't 0, as long as that base wasn't 0. For B, we have negative 2 to the negative 4th power. So we're going to do the reciprocal of that, 1 over negative 2 to the 4th. You'll notice when we change to the reciprocal, the exponent becomes positive. Now we can go ahead and evaluate this. 1 over negative 2 times itself 4 times, which is 1/16. Here we have 4x to the 0 over y to the negative 3. This is a good example when we have a negative exponent, but it's not the only thing that's going on. So instead of just doing the reciprocal of that y to the 3rd and putting a fraction inside of a fraction, what we're going to do is we're going to take it and move it up to the top with our 4x to the 0. And when we do that, it makes our exponent positive. So we have 4x to the 0, y to the 3rd. Now we know x to the 0 is equal to 1. So 4 times 1 times y to the 3rd is 4y to the 3rd. All right, here's a few more practice ones. Negative 9 to the 0 power. Since this isn't a 0, anything to that power of 0 is 1. On number 2, our 3 is being taken to a negative power, so we're going to do the reciprocal. 1 over 3 to the 3rd is 1 over 27. You'll notice, see how that did not make anything negative. All it did was move it to the denominator. With this one on number 3, we need to be very careful. You'll notice that that negative 5 is not in parentheses. So what that means is the opposite of 5 to the 0 power. And what is 5 to the 0 power? Well, 5 to the 0 power is 1. And the opposite of 1 is negative 1. So our result on the top there is negative 1. So we have negative 1 over 2 to the negative 2. Sometimes this piece right here is kind of tricky. Negative 5 to the 0 power and negative 5 to the 0 power mean two different things. On this first one, the negative is part of what's being taken to the exponent. On the second one, the negative is something that happens after the exponent. So we have to be careful with those. Okay, coming back to number 3, we still have something with a negative exponent, that 2 to the negative 2. So since this has a negative exponent, We're going to move that up to the top. We still have negative 1 on top, so negative 1 times 2 squared. 2 squared is 4, so negative 4. On number 4, we're simplifying this expression. We want to write it with positive exponents. So anything that has a negative exponent is going to need to move. So our 3 to the negative 2, that has a negative exponent, and so does x to the negative 5. Both of those are going to move to the bottom. We know y to the 0 is 1, so times 1. We can't leave our numerator blank up here. Really, that's a 1 up there. So equals 1. And then we're going to simplify what we can. We know 3 squared is 9, but we can't do anything with x to the 5th. So we're going to come up with 1 over 9x to the 5th. Okay, here are some practice problems for you to try. I want you to pause the video and try these problems, and then when you turn it on, I'll have the answers ready for you. So go ahead and pause it now. Okay, now that you've finished, let's check what you did. The first two both had an exponent of 0, so they just gave us 1. Number 3, we had that negative exponent of 4, so we moved it to the bottom. And we got 1 over 3 to the 4th, which is 1 over 81. Number 4 was very much the same, except that we had a negative number inside our parentheses. And so since it was a negative taken to an odd power, negative times negative times negative, our result ended up being negative. On number 5, 5 to the 0 was 1. And we brought our 2 to the 3rd to the bottom, giving us 1/8. Number 6, we had to be very careful with that negative sign right there because it's not being taken to the power of negative 2. This is kind of like saying negative 3 to the negative 2. So only the 3 squared came to the bottom and then negative stayed on the top. Here we had another negative exponent, so it moved to the top, giving us negative 8/9. On number 7, we had that negative again, which meant negative 7 to the 0, which gave us negative 1. And then that 4 to the 1st came down since it had a negative exponent. And then for the last one, the negative was inside the parentheses, so negative 5 to the 0 is positive 1. Our 3 had a negative exponent, so it came to the bottom, leaving us with 1/3.